Today we are discussing strategic architecture of management. Having discussed what is management and what are the approaches to management, we are discussing this aspect, which is a rather new understanding of the concepts of management. In our first lecture, we had some reference to strategy and strategic management, and at that point I had talked to you about what is strategy. So, I am once again repeating that particular paragraph. Let us see what is a strategy. This is to match an organization between the individual and the other resources. So, the internal resources, the skills, the opportunities and risks created by the external environment over long period of time, okay, for competitive advantage. Professor Grant has given us this definition of strategy. So, starting with this strategy, so why is strategic? So, we would like to answer that question, because strategy regards people as the most important asset of an organization, and that is why it becomes so important for us to discuss the strategic architecture before we take up the other lessons, other chapters in this course. So, let us move on to see that what happens in terms of strategy. It involves all managerial personnel. It is proactive in its relationship with people. It seeks to enhance organizational performance, employee needs and social well-being. It is similar to when we talk about the strategic architecture, then we have to understand why are we using this word. This is a rather new approach to analyze management and the strategic management, the strategic architecture. So, here we are trying to understand from those components, we are moving to understand the word, the term, the strategic architecture. Similar to construction architecture, all of you know about the architecture, that is the construction architecture. The strategic architecture is created with inputs from the participants of the organization, and if we try to talk about participants, the participants are of course the managers, the employees, the stakeholders, the consumers, all are the participants to an organization. So, when we are looking at the strategic architecture of management, we are looking at the inputs that we get by creation of the points of views of all these participants. And strategic architecture considers customers' needs and takes into consideration evolving emerging trends in the market where organizations operate. So, we understand that when we have said participants, that means we are talking about the participants, those who are working in the organization, as well as the consumers and the stakeholders, and of course, here we are also talking about the environment of the organization where it operates. So, strategic architecture is combines so many issues. Basic idea of course is to achieve the competitive advantage in today's environment. The process of creating a strategic architecture thus involves consideration of organization's strengths and weaknesses. Whenever we are trying to develop a strategic architecture for our company, we have to first analyze the strengths and weaknesses of our company. In other words, you must have heard about the SWOT analysis, which we will also refer to in one of our lectures later. So, once we analyze the strengths and weaknesses of the organizations, the strategic architecture is in place for an organization, operational decisions involving strategic issues, and this can more rapidly and more correctly be made for the effectiveness of an organization. Yes, so are you understanding the strategic architecture? Okay. So, we are talking that is so many things at the same time, and basically we are looking at the inputs from all the participants of the organization. This can also include, for example, the areas of focus and investment for marketing, sales, manufacturing, research and development, acquisitions and mergers, intellectual property licensing, we can say, or intellectual property decisions, rights. All these aspects are included in the focus of strategic architecture of management. So, we are talking about all these in our course. Okay. So, the examples we will try to bring from all these areas when we are doing different chapters in our course. This also brings us to a very closely related issue of strategic thinking. Strategic thinking is an important aspect of organizational functioning, and of course, an important aspect of strategic architecture of management. Excuse me. The need for managers to be able to think critically is stressed in this aspect when we are talking about strategic thinking, and that is why sometimes we say that okay, go to that manager, he can perhaps give you the best advice. If you look deeply, you will find that okay, perhaps that manager has the capacity to think strategically, and so he can arrive at a better decision than others. So, in terms of strategic thinking, what we are talking about closely related to strategic architecture, while strategic management incorporates major changes in direction such as diversification and growth overseas, for example, we have global scenario now. So, overseas growth, that becomes very important, and it also involves smaller changes or lower level changes in individual products and services within an organization. So, whereas we are talking about the changes within an organization, also we are talking about changes outside the organization, because after all the competition is with the world. The competitive advantage that we can get in the total overall scenario. So, it becomes very important, and therefore, strategic thinking becomes very important. Now, in this, mergers and acquisitions are important factors, and these days in India we are finding that there are many companies, they are being merged with others, or others have acquired some other companies. Okay. This is also an important aspect of strategic management today. So, managers excuse me, who can really make an influential decision, they need to have some basic understanding of the strategic content. In fact, all managers, all of you, those who are doing this course, should have this idea, because this is something new in the management literature to talk about the strategic thinking, strategic architecture and the strategic management approach. So, the major goals of this process, we have just tried to list those. Let us see the major goals. That major goals are establishing a clear direction for the company. For your company, first you have to establish a clear direction. Before that, you have to do your strength and weaknesses analysis, some kind of a SWOT analysis you have to do for your company, and then establishing the clear direction for the company. Then creation of strong competitive position. Only when you have done your SWOT analysis earlier, you will be in a position to really create a strong competitive position, because how do you really settle yourself, in this market of competition. So you have to really design all that in terms of your thinking, your analysis and so on. Then ensure continued innovation. In fact, in the later part of the course, again we are going to talk about innovation and creativity, and this reference might come in many other chapters as well. But for now, let us try to understand that no organization that is stagnant and which does not encourage innovation can really sustain today's competitive environment. So, if we are looking at the strategic architecture, one of the important aspects are innovation, and the other one is we have to ensure the responsiveness to pressures for change, and the world is ever changing. In fact, people are ever changing, the society is ever changing, and so nothing is so stable and so static. We are all living in the dynamic world which is ever changing, and so we have to ensure that we are responsive to the change that is happening around us, in people, in organizations, in the competitors, okay, wherever. So, you have to be really very careful about the kind of a change which creates a lot of challenge for you. Also, we have to create the strategic awareness and the competencies. In our own organization, we have to create strategic awareness and the competencies. So, we have to in fact take everyone with us and try to see what is the competency, what is the core competency of my organization, and which I can really enhance in this today's competitive world, okay, putting an input from innovation, from creativity of people and so on. So, we have to see that people are given that opportunity of strategic awareness. Unless we do that, it may be difficult for us to really achieve the competitive advantage. And so, the strategic awareness and change would perhaps involve strategic analysis, about for many other analysis, for example, SWOT analysis I have talked to you now, but other aspects of the analysis we will be talking about in our later lectures. Then strategic creation and choice, we have innovation, you can have the strategic creations and you can have better strategic choices. Strategic implementation, and so the strategic management process, in fact, I should have written strategic management process, I have written strategic process, okay, read it as the strategic management process. Here I would like to give you a quotation by Francis Bacon, that a wise man will make more opportunities than he finds. Okay. He will make more opportunities himself. Okay. That is the strategic way of looking at today's management. So, this brings us to the new business paradigms that we have, and these you can see that the reflection of strategic management issues are coming up here. So, in the strategic new paradigms, we look at the strategic flexibility, we look at the emerging strategic thinking, which I have already discussed with you. E-business strategy, this again becomes very important when we are looking at the new business paradigms. No industry today can come up to the mark unless they have really mastered themselves in e-business too. Well, other business paradigms are there, but e-business becomes very important in today's context. Then the global competitiveness. Earlier we were not looking at global competitiveness, perhaps we were, every country perhaps was manufacturing within their own country and the social setup. But today the world has changed, and no industry perhaps is working only within one's own country because of globalization. So, we have to look at the global competitiveness in terms of whatever business we are doing. Then the strategic alliances, mergers and acquisitions for globalization, these also become important, about which I have just short while ago I was just talking to you about it. Management of innovation and development. We have discussed that. Technology management, what kind of a technology do we need for a particular country, for a particular system of particular organization. The same technology which has been there, can we continue with that technology, or do we need the technology management in terms of some innovation, some better management strategies? Perhaps we have to analyze that in terms of strategic management. Say one example that comes to my mind here is like we are really doing very well these days in terms of our business environment that looks for the infrastructure. And when we are looking at infrastructure, there are some raw materials which we really need. So, I was just talking to someone who is manufacturer of brick and tile making machineries, not brick and tile making, but machinery maker. And so I was given an impression that brick and tile machinery, people normally believe that okay, it's going to be a very small kind of a business, but when it comes to the automated system, it may run into crores. And that is why, to start with, the technology that they are using are still the traditional technology of handmade bricks or and of that kind. So, the person told me that even though he has this technology and he has established many such plants in India, but there are not very many takers for that technology. But if we look at the demands in our country and perhaps the need in our country, we do need the mechanized project, which is much better in quality and perhaps in terms of number for developing our infrastructure. So, technology management becomes very important, and we have to look at the environment, we have to look at the population, we have to look at the technology at what level, the investment in that technology and so on. So, technology management again is a strategic management issue. E-business models we have already discussed, the e-business models and applications we have already talked about that. And then the supply chain management, that again is an important one of the most important aspects in management. the supply chain, how do you, where do you manufacture, how do you do the marketing, how do you really develop the best supply chain, yes, which also gives you a lot of sort of competitive advantage, feedback, okay, and perhaps very good performance. Then the issue of knowledge management we have to consider in this context. We have talked about innovation, creativity short while ago, but knowledge management becomes very important, because unless we create new knowledge, unless we really have say the wonderful systems, wonderful designs, wonderful software, wonderful knowledge, say the designs important, and some of the other technological considerations where new knowledge has been generated. That becomes an extremely important factor for the competitive advantage. So, the knowledge industry today is doing very well, and knowledge management becomes very important for the organizations today. Then the quality management, unless we have manufactured something that is of the best quality, we cannot survive in the international market. So, in the competitive advantage we will go down, and that is very important, and we find that in terms of quality sometimes organizations get defeated, because the quality you may have all technical requirements, all infrastructure, yet there is something that is there in the minds of people that okay, I think this much will do, but actually that does not come out to be the best strategy for us. Quality means we have to try to achieve the best quality in whatever we are doing, whether it is manufacturing or it is services or it is in any other we can say the sphere of business. So, quality becomes an important factor, and which adds to productivity of an organization. We will be discussing about all these issues in our lectures, and you will find that the references will again be coming there. Then the organizational learning, this which is again very closely related to the knowledge management, where the organizational learning or learning organizations, they create new knowledge and they develop the new knowledge, okay, and based on which they are functioning. So, learning organizations become an important aspect of the strategic management today. And very closely related to that, when we are discussing all these, you can see that unless we have an organizational culture which has been designed also strategically, we will not be able to achieve the organizational effectiveness. So, organizational culture becomes extremely important. See, when we do any collaboration, when we have any kind of a such business we can say mergers, acquisitions, one of the important issues there is that when we are merging two things, the two cultures also get merged. So, how do we actually manage this merger and acquisition in terms of culture? Say in from some other country we have some know-how and some collaboration. People will come from there and give you training, but they will also expect you to actually act according to their culture. But then we out in India we have a different culture. People have grown in that culture. So, we have to give them training. If that culture is important for organizational effectiveness or for achieving competitive advantage. If we can do with our Indian culture, that is all right, that is very good. But what happens with whenever we are introducing a technology, we also need to look into the kind of a work culture that we need to have. Okay. So, work culture becomes an extremely important factor, and which in turn will lead to the effectiveness of the system. Core competency, we were talking about the core competence. Every organization and every individual has some core competence. So, we have to actually find out whose core competence of what type and the organization's core competence is what. If you are good into the say the design and development kind of a thing, then you have to concentrate more on that. If you are too good in say marketing, you have to concentrate on that, even though every organization has to do marketing at the end of the day, but you can certainly look at the core competence that you have within your organization and within your people. Then you can strategically design a success story for you. So, we have already discussed the choice of technology when I was talking to you about technology management, but once again I have written here choice of technology, which becomes very important, and I gave you that example, one example also. Same example, like I know one entrepreneur who has been developing a machine for textile unit, and which is between handlooms and those large looms, completely automated plants. So, in between those we do not have lot of technology for the manufacture of textiles. So, I know one entrepreneur who is doing that. So, now when we are talking about choice of technology, perhaps everyone cannot invest crores in a textile plant, whereas handlooms also are there, but then in between if we have something in between which has the investment is something at the middle level, maybe there may be many takers, and that may fulfill the need of our development need of our country in some way. So, the choice of technology also, when we we have to see what technology we have to choose for which industry and why. And the management of change issue also I was discussing earlier, that the world is changing, and so every day we have to keep our eyes and ears open, that what is changing, what is in the offing in the next years, what may be the possible change, and how the impact of other countries coming to our country. So many issues are there. So, proactively actually we have to design our success story, as I said. So, organizations have to be proactively ready for the change that is coming, and that is the strategic aspect of strategic management. So, here the next let me put Professor Hewlett's one of the studies, that is demonstrating a statistically and practically significant relationship between human resource management practices and the corporate performance. So, when we are looking at the strategic management, we have the overall strategies for an organization, and also one of the latest things in that is the strategic human resource management. And so, now in a couple of minutes we will be talking about the issues related to human resource management, which are related to the business strategy. So, they are aspects of the broader strategic architecture of an organization, but just let us see what is human resource strategic human resource management related strategy. So, here in this context I thought that Professor Hewlett's study I am going to quote here, that in a study he found that the relationship between human resource management practices and the corporate performance, there is relationship, significant relationship between the two. That means, in addition to other strategies, we have to pay lot more attention to the human resource management strategy. And another study on the human resource management strategy or strategic human resource management, we can say, we find that the industry focused study, this illustrated that how particular bundles of human resource practices when aligned with organizational logic lead to plant level performance. So, if you recollect short while ago I was talking to you about that quality when we are discussing, but quality is there also in the minds of people. They have to be prepared, doing good quality work, only then they will do it. Otherwise, you may have all infrastructure, everything, but results may not be that satisfactory. So, here you can see this professor McDelfay, he has talked about the relationship again, just like the earlier study, that unless we have designed our organization keeping in view the strategic human resource management aspects, it may be difficult for us to really achieve the success of an organization. So, you can see at the plant level the success could be achieved using strategic human resource management. Let me talk to you about strategic human resource management a little bit more. This term was introduced and first, or we can say the coined by Faubourn, Tichy, Devanna in 1984, when they first talked about strategic human resource management, and they suggested that HR systems and organizational structures should be managed in such a way which is congruent to the organizational strategy. So, do you understand now the relationship between there is an organizational strategy, a whole organization, and within which the HR strategy. So, the HR strategy has an important impact on the overall organizational strategy. Okay, are you understanding? Now, we are talking about the strategic human resource management, which has great impact on overall organizational strategy and therefore performance. The whole concept of strategic human resource management is based on the notion that HR strategies should be integrated with the corporate or the business strategy, and that we have discussed already. Are you understanding the strategic architecture we have began? Okay, and we are talking about the strategic architecture. We have talked about the other issues, other I will say the macro level rather issues, and now we are talking about the strategic human resource management issues, which are extremely important and which have very close relationship with the overall organizational performance. So, the major developments in the human resource management, strategic human resource management are: the first, they shift from the old personal management to the administration to the human resource management, and people are important aspects or the assets of an organization that can be managed systematically by coordinating the shape and substance of several traditional personnel policies and practices. So, some of the aspects which we are looking at the strategic human resource management at the point of we can say departure from the earlier one, that is what we are trying to see. Now, the second issue here is the orientation of the generic strategies models of human resource management to more modern concepts of strategic human resource management. Is it clear? Yes. So, based on the philosophy that in addition to coordinating HR practices and the HR policies with each other, they are needed to be coordinated or linked with the needs of the organization. In fact, that is a repetition of what I have already said in a short while ago, that strategic human resource management has to be related to or integrated within the strategy of the overall organization. And so, strategic human resource management covers some of the issues like, because all these will have implications for the overall strategic architecture and will lead to better performance of the organization. So, the some of the issues that I am trying to list here are the organizational effectiveness issue, the issue of performance, the issue of competence, the issue of matching resources to future business requirement. Here say HRD becomes an important aspect, the future business, future requirement of resources that we have. Employee development and deployment, again related to training and development, and this places emphasis on the strategic HR practices, flexibility. You can see here we are talking about flexibility in terms of strategic human resource management, but earlier we were talking about strategy in overall business scenario. Communication, that becomes very important aspect. Organizational learning, we have discussed that short while ago. Leadership, organizational structure. See, one could have a tall structure of an organization or could have a flat structure of an organization. You understand the tall structure and the flat structure of an organization. Tall structure, that means there are many levels in hierarchy, and maybe there are some 6, 7, 8, 9. So, the top manager is there, and next level 2 persons, another level 4 persons, then 5 persons, like that. But in a flat structure you do not have so many levels of hierarchy. Suppose you have just 3 levels of hierarchy. So, there is general manager, then there are managers of different sections, and then you have the departments. And so, what happens in the flat structure, since the hierarchies are lesser in number, some of the researchers reveal that there is greater satisfaction in people. If you have many number of hierarchy is too many, then because see the lowest level person can never get to know the top person or even the middle person. So, sometimes this does not give them great satisfaction, and which may have implications for other things like motivation and the other things. Okay, so the organizational structure is important. We have talked about the communication, that is important, the leadership style, that is important. Then organizational capabilities are important, we have talked about that earlier. Then coherence is important, empowerment of employees, empowering your employees as well as empowering climate in organization. So, empowering organizations are also important. On all these aspects, in fact, we are going to have one lecture each. On empowerment, we will have one lecture. On leadership, we may have 2 lectures. On motivation, again we may have 2 lectures. Then communication, again we will have 2 lectures. So, on all these aspects, whatever we are discussing, we will have the further elaboration of all these in the lectures which are coming up in this course. Then participative management, again we will have couple of lectures. Yes, where we involve people in decision making, and there are many strategies and many styles of participative management, and different countries follow different styles in participative management. So, we will be discussing this in great details, and this is again very important from the point of view of strategic management. Then organizational commitment of the employees. They must think, they must believe that this is my organization. So, once they have this feeling that this is my organization, then that reflects on their performance. Moment they come and say that okay, I am getting just salary here from here, okay, then you do not have commitment for the organization. And what management is today looking for is organizational commitment. That means from the core of the heart you say okay, this is my organization and I will try to do the best for my organization. That is organizational commitment. We will be talking about it again as I said in one of the lectures. Then coming to organizational culture, the climate that we have, the kind of culture that we have. There are a lot of researches have been done on the kind of culture that we have. For example, we have number of studies. There are studies which relate to the values which make culture. One of the important studies by Hofstede. These will come up when we are discussing the the lecture on say the values and ethics and so on. But very briefly I will be touching upon those in today's lecture as well. Yes. So, what are the agreements about human resource management? The human capital can be a source of competitive advantage. Human resource management practices have most direct influence on the human capital of the firm. The complex nature of human resource management systems, of practices, we can we could enhance those yes, and we can imitate the imitability of the system. And now in a few minutes we will be discussing about the human resources and the technological change. Well, we are talking about everything within the overall understanding of the strategic architecture of management, where now we have come to discuss about the strategic human resource management. And since change becomes an important inevitable aspect, in fact, we have to understand that that human resource management also has a lot to do in that. So, let us see what are the issues. I am discussing these very briefly today because most of these will form part of a chapter in our overall course. The first is the skill development, and skill development, all of you know that we have manpower, but we find that they are not really skilled to that extent that perhaps the organizations could hire them. And there are in skill development we have of course the technical skills, we also have the generic skills. So, we need to really have a massive program on skill development in management, well overall in society, but if you are hiring people, then perhaps your organization also has to put in some budget for this. And then creating knowledge. So, lot of research and development is needed when you want to. There are some industries where there is no R&D at all. By R&D I am not meaning that there has to be a very major input there, but at least something to do with the kind of manufacturing that you are doing. Some research and development, some knowledge generation has to be there. Then the creativity, we have to create conditions where people will come out with creativity. And so, because creativity is there in the minds of people, and unless managers really create such conditions, people will keep that within themselves, and that remains dormant, and the organization will not have any advantage of that creative mind. And in fact, we can say that all of us have creativity somewhere or the other, but only if we are given the opportunity, we come out with that creativity, otherwise we just do not speak. Okay. So, if we have to create conditions, then look at the creativity of people, then the attitude of people. See, attitude is the major attitude we can see are learning. We have learned our attitude, whether to be very efficient at the place of work and very I will say at the place of work very responsible. See, these are attitudes. Sometimes we just look for a job and then we believe that okay, getting the job was my task. Once I have got the job, that means no work. Okay, that kind of attitude I have seen in many people. But once you have got a job, it becomes your great responsibility to actually do that job very efficiently. So, that is the matter of attitude. Maybe others have given them to understand that once you have taken up a job, nobody can remove you, so do not work. But how one enjoys life? I think working also is a great enjoyment. So, we will talk about this again once in one of the lectures. So, in strategic human resource management, again this I have taken the authorities in strategic human resource management, Schiller and Jackson, that the strategic human resource management is the explicit link of HRM, okay, that HRM has with the strategic management process of any organization. This is what we are trying to understand under our understanding of the strategic architecture. Another authors, they Wright and McMahon, they have said that in simple terms, strategic human resource management is all about systematically linking people with the firm. And in this, there are number of evolutionary stages. Okay. The first stage of course began earlier, and in late 19th century we had the second, then the period of immigration to USA, that also started, and that was the first, we can say that, and then the early 1900 1930 period of market pressures, World War I, great economic depression. Then 1930 to 1950 we have a period of growth of labor unions and the World War II. 1960s and 1970s we had the period of government legislations. We are generally talking about how the growth has taken place all over the globe, not any specific country we are talking about, we are talking about all over the world. I mean how gradually the management thinking has emerged, and it has got matured and in this form of the strategic thinking today. 70s to 84 and this is the period of globalization, economic liberalization. Many of you might have read about it because not very long, and of course, the 1984 onwards, the period of IT and communication revolution. Globalization continues, emergence of China and India as the centers of the economic power. So, this is the way what we are finding that the growth is taking place, and for all these understanding all this growth and for understanding all this strategic architecture, we have to understand number of other factors which relate to the values and ethics in the organization. So, in the next part of today's lecture, I am talking to you about the role of values in organizations. Values, both the individual personal values, the organizational values, the social values, okay, those values, and in addition to that the social values. So, in the recent years, the management thinkers have started emphasizing on the importance of value based practices in management. This is due to the realization that values are core motivating and guiding variables of human behavior, and creating a value based management environment you will find a better human behavior, okay, better performance and so on. So, values operate at two levels. This is what I was trying to say short while ago. Values operate at the organizational level and at the personal level. So, organizational values and personal values. Organizational values are the values written in the value statement of the organization. You understand, these days every organization has certain statements, certain value statements, certain mission statements. Yes, so we'll come to that. And values become the core competencies when they are widely shared by their members. Yes, values become core competencies if these are widely shared by their members. So, personal values play a role, important role in guiding one's personal behavior. And as a personal value is a belief regarding certain factors, regarding something which is held in high esteem and serves to motivate behavior. So, in organizations, some ways by which personal values play a role in the organization's working are, well, some of the factors are that the personal value system influences managers' perceptions of situations and problems that the person faces in the organization. Personal value system also influences a manager's decisions on solutions to problems. Have you ever given a thought to values? All of us have values, and the organizations also create climate of values. So, the personal value system, this influences the interpersonal relations among the managers of the, this has to be not only managers, it has members. Okay, among the managers of the organization, this I had put, but also understand among the managers as well as other members of the organization. So, understand interpersonal, so the values make that relationship. And the practice of professed values would also influence the organizational climate. So, now we are coming from the personal values, okay, personal values and the organization's values, okay, and so the practice of professed values which influence the climate of the organization. In many organizations, I have heard people saying that no, I do not want to, even if the pay is the same, but I do not want to work there because there the behavior is like this, or the something of that kind. So, people do look for the organizational values as well, which relate to work culture in that organization. So, institutionalization of values would result in improved ethical practices in the organization, which would then enhance organizational climate. So, we are coming to from values to ethics to organizational mission and all those factors. In a number of studies conducted by us, in fact, we have also done a lot of studies. Earlier I have given you the reference of some of the other researchers and authorities, and number of studies which we have also conducted. These reveal that values have become important and extremely important factor in today's context in Indian organizations, And most of the Navratna companies, some of the studies which I have done with Navratna companies, and most of the Navratna companies and the leading organizations have clear values and mission statement. So, we find that the work ethics also become extremely important factors. Work ethics, this is a value that defines work as a virtue and the source of dignity. We are coming to organizational ethics, which is important and which is strongly influenced by the evaluation of the individual behavior and performance. Corporate code of conduct, this represents an effort to specify behavior that the company does or does not really sanction. So, there are also the factors like engineering ethics, and the one could be ethical engineer and so on. And the issue of organizational commitment again becomes an extremely important factor, and the management science today is actually looking at organizational commitment in a big way. So, when we are looking at from the practitioner's point of view, we find that employees' loyalty to the organization becomes important, and then of course, the empowerment. I will not take up much time in empowerment, because I will be discussing with you the empowerment concept in great details, and I will be talking about decision making, then participative management, creating conditions for heightened emotions, the content of intrinsic task motivation, flexibility, and I will be discussing some of these issues, the possible response to the business environment. And okay, so the other aspects we will be discussing in our next lecture.